So now on stage is going to be Daphne Zargar with her talk about why I love heavy metal. And I thought that was quite an interesting title for your talk, because you will be speaking about your work at General Motors, a project called Project 34, which focuses on women in their third act of life. I thought that was quite interesting, quite unique. And also, I'm not sure how you're going to connect that, but you'll be talking about, is a connected car more than just a smartphone on wheels? So please, everyone, welcome Daphne Zargar.
Thank you. It's the clicker. It's up there. Guten Abend. Thank you for the introduction, and it's a real pleasure to be here with all these amazing people. So, again, my name is Daphne Zargar. I'm the Global Manager for Partner Relations at General Motors. And what that means is my team works with all the companies in the world that want to bring their apps into this. We also develop the tools, the SDK and Emulator, and we're about 4 months into our proof of concept, and we'll be delivering that towards the end of the year that helps any developer in the world build an app on that. So we work with the Spotifys, iHearts, Pandoras, anyone looking to put an app integration into GM's vehicle. Now, what makes GM's infotainment system unique? Well, what really happens when you can build an app right on the vehicle versus a phone that you plug into a USB and projects into the screen, which is typically what you see in automotive manufacturing. Well, this is what happens. You get access to over 300 real-time data vehicle points. And to put that in perspective, the next closest auto manufacturer connects to 20 data points. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connect to just 6 data points. So we're really excited because we're right at the tip of the iceberg of starting to see what new ways developers around the world are going to access these 387 to be specific data points, and what they're going to do with those. So to talk a little bit about the history of our SDK emulator, General Motors has had an SDK emulator over the years. The one in the past, you had to utilize Eclipse. You actually had to downgrade your software in order to be able to use it. So 4 months ago, and I'm almost at my 4-month anniversary at GM, so the SDK is 4 months old, as well as my anniversary at GM. 4 months ago, we decided to wipe the slate clean and really focus on the developer as our client. So what do developers need and want in order to be able to understand how to build apps for GM vehicles? So my team came up with their version of the SDK emulator. And as you can see here, those 3 lines on the left, those 3 lines of code get you access to vehicle data right away. So it's very easy to install and up and running. The really cool thing is that we got rid of Eclipse, and you're able to use web technology. So your HTML, JavaScript software developers can easily get up and running to start to build apps for any GM vehicle. To put the scope of what's really going on at GM in perspective, we have about 10 million connected cars globally. Not 2G, not 3G, but 4G LTE connected vehicles. That's more than every other auto manufacturer combined. So I get asked a lot, and even internally in different departments, a lot of people will approach me and my team on the partner relations side and say, well, we already have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, so why not just focus on developing apps for them? But I'm interested to know, do people in Germany or Europe name their vehicles? Do you guys name your cars here and there? Yeah. So in the United States, we do tend to have a relationship with our car. And for example, My company car is this massive Yukon XL. And so I don't park my Yukon XL in the garage every night. I park Big Betty, as my 9-year-old daughter calls her, in the car every night. So when we get into the car, my daughter wants to interact with Big Betty. And Big Betty is the native platform that is on your infotainment system. So as I started in my first few months of getting to know the landscape of GM, and was really surprised at just the capabilities and the opportunities that lied there with the uniqueness of investing and building out our own platform. You start to look at, in this case, Apple CarPlay. They have 69 apps that connect, but every single one of their third-party apps are audio streaming. So there's really a huge gap of opportunity to address point-of-interest apps, real estate. 62% of Android Auto apps are audio streaming. So when you take a look at this landscape, we really believe that the native experience is there and people want to interact with what is already in the car versus having to connect your USB and have a pretty disjointed user experience along the way. So what we're really trying to address, and if you think about how you develop apps for vehicles in the automotive industry in general, we come across what's known in the industry as the clock speed dilemma. And what this represents is you have a production timeline that usually has about a 2-year lead time. So if you think about as the car is getting built out from a production perspective, it's done, and 2 years later, it's rolling off the lot. Now, you overlay that with a software timeline and the customer expectation that you should be able to update your experience similar to your iPhone and have that similar experience in your vehicle. And so what my team is really looking to do is to close that gap between the software timeline that's iterative, agile, and the production timeline that we don't have much control over by putting this SDK emulator out into the world by the end of this year. So we've talked a lot about innovation and getting new perspectives and getting different ideas. And that was really important for me and our team at GM and Partner Relations. So it was vital for us to get our software development kit emulator out of GM, off our floor, and out into developers' hands. So just this past weekend, we sponsored a large hackathon, an intense coding competition, this one lasting about 36 hours, called MHacks. And that was held at the Detroit Masonic Temple. And it's huge, over 2,000 developers show up. So for the first time ever, we took our hardware out of GM's labs. Our hardware looks like about 40-pound rectangular benches that are actually have the steering wheel, the cluster, and your screen so that you could sideload an app and test it after developing it on the emulator from your laptop. So this was really exciting for the college students and for us to start to get some feedback around where we could improve the guidelines, the APIs, and also just to see how were people going to utilize these 387 data points in ways that we weren't thinking about because we eat, live, and breathe this platform every day. So the first night after, and this is an actual picture from opening ceremonies that I took just so you can get a sense of the amount of developers and the excitement and energy in the room. So that first night, 232 developers downloaded our SDK, and after 36 hours, they presented 26 apps and projects. So it was really great to see the excitement and the ease with which they could get going with this tool. Here's down on the developing floor. You can see some of our hardware just up right in the middle. Kind of hard to see there, but so it was packed. So it's really important to get out and do these types of events to get those different perspectives. I want to back up just a little bit before I show that. So I like to if you saw the panel on hiring, I like to tell stories versus just talk about how you can innovate. And as one of my colleagues and former speaker, Alicia, mentioned, it's really a great way that I applied. And I utilized events as this safe space to create opportunities for innovation. So my team had an idea around how they could utilize the cars to show just how real-time the data is coming off of our vehicles, which is unique to the GM's platform. And I can imagine if I went to leadership in GM and said, hey, my team wants to do this innovative project that turns 2 cars into video game controllers. Well, as you can imagine, any company or corporation, I can imagine the first question is going to be, how does this sell more cars? How much money? How is this going to make money? What is legal going to say about turning cars into video game controllers? And what's the ROI? So I avoided that conversation and instead looked to sponsoring this hackathon development, which got us a 1.5-hour demo. So events and sponsorships are great little shells and safe spaces to find innovative opportunities for your teams in. And what happens, as Alicia pointed out, is that the innovation internal champions naturally rise to the top. So while I gave the team free rein to start to build out their video game, they mentioned to me, you know what would be really great is if we could get Corvettes for this game. And I said, well, let me see what I can do. They're not easy to get. So I went to the hardware support guy and I said, Sammer, what do you think about getting Corvettes? And he's like, I could really push to get 1. And I said, well, I really need 2 to run the game. And he's like, that's not going to happen. So but he was in it. He was gonna give it the go-ahead. And slowly but surely, a lot of people started getting involved in this, what we called heavy metal racing game. And once I saw that they had developed it to a certain point, I went to my boss, and I said, what do you think about if the game, if we develop this game, like what's the possibility? Could you champion us getting the Corvettes? And he said, well, the game has to be really badass and for me to approve getting the Corvettes. So the other tricky thing that I don't tell my team is that enveloping their innovation into events creates a nice little timeline that has to be delivered upon. So I told them they could, if the boss thought the video game was really cool, they could get the Corvettes. So needless to say, they got the Corvettes. And we didn't just get Corvettes, we got the Grand Sport 2017 Corvettes. So you can imagine at opening ceremony when one of my lead software developers announced to these college kids that they were going to get to play this retro arcade game in Corvettes. They just went nuts. So it was just a fantastic way of generating a lot of energy. The really unique thing that happened a couple of days after that is that our chief technology officer came down to the lab to check out how we were interpreting real-time data usage. Now, how many CTOs at a Fortune 500 company have the time to go play a video game in the middle of their day? Again, create a safe space to come play and innovate. So while this was fun and it was, it was an immersive, engaging experience and it allowed the team to innovate, it did have a purpose, and that was, if you can think about, here you see the track of the retro game in this demo. If there's even a half-a-second delay or a 1-second delay of you turning your wheel or pushing the gas to drive your car around, this game doesn't work. So the video game actually was a fantastic way to show just how real the real-time data you can access coming off of GM's infotainment platform is. So we mentioned Project 34. And I actually thought that was a bit more of the panel, but I can try to tie it into my infotainment platform. So Project 34, this is an initiative, I just called it Project 34, and as I mentioned in the platform, this was really about hiring, how do you hire diverse women and minorities into your team to get a lot of these innovative ideas. And while I looked around me, I saw a lot of initiatives were focused on bringing the next generation of women in technology or women in engineers up. And I realized that even in my own life, I had a lot of women mentors that were retired, in some cases, executive life coaches from marketing, other technology sectors, and they still wanted to contribute and provide value. So I went to my boss and I said, you know, I have this concept in my mind and I really want to start to try to be intentional about engaging women that are in this older sector, about lower 50s on up. And the reason why I called it Project 34 is that there was a lot of conversation around a new statistic that was out that we're living on average 34 years longer than what my grandparents and great-grandparents lived. So women today are actually living an entire lifetime than the previous generations. And so my boss was very supportive, and I said, I don't know exactly what this looks like, but I want to become a little more intentional about that. And if you think about it, if you take a teenage or new grad that has no exposure to technology, and you're going to put them into learning how to code or write technical documents, it takes just as long to train them up as it would a 55 or 60-year-old woman who wants to get back into the workforce. So we were able to come face to face with this opportunity on my own team just a couple months ago. And we were looking to hire a technical writer. And for the type of platform and software development kit that we work for, we needed very technical documentation. So we interviewed a lot of young people, developers and coders, who had coding experience, but kind of did technical documentation on the side. And then we interviewed Lori, who was a technical writer for a healthcare company, I think for 15 years, and had recently gotten downsized. She had no coding background at all, but she had written some technical documents for the healthcare industry. And this was an interesting situation for me and my team to talk through, because the ramp-up time for somebody who understood coding would be a lot shorter than hiring Lori, who was an older healthcare professional technical writer. So long story short, we ended up hiring Lori, and she was organized, she was excited, she was hungry, and she was grateful. She was grateful. She was really happy to be a part of the team. And so even though our team's dynamic looked pretty interesting for being a connected vehicle, everybody really jumped in and started getting the work done. And a few weeks into it, a couple of my team members came running up and said, Daphne, you have to go talk to Lori and ask her about this story. Like, they didn't want to tell me the story or give it away. And as we were getting ready to do the hackathon, Lori said, I'm really sorry, but I can't support that weekend because my skydiving team is having a reunion. And everybody on my team's head just exploded. This is not the typical woman we thought was just jumping out of airplanes. So it turns out she had done 375 jumps and was actually one of those people that would parachute down into sports stadiums. So it's just a really great story around how, if you make an intention and find those safe spaces for innovation and take the risks on hiring people that aren't necessarily what your expectation was, you can have some really amazing results. So all that being said, GM is really uniquely positioned, more so than any other auto manufacturer, to introduce apps and to access these vehicle data points. So from now to the end of the year, while we get this ready for shipping it to the public, I'm here today and tomorrow, and I welcome any company, any thought, or any idea around how to integrate into our vehicle platforms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the audience? There's one over here.
Hello, I'm Claire Tischer from SAP, and you talked about 300 and plus data points. Are these telemetric data, like the engine speed or something like that? Is that what you mean by data points?
Yeah, that's a great question. So your top few data points are typically geolocation, hard braking, speed, acceleration. We have documented, I think, close to 200 of them right now, and we should finish documenting them for the APIs for developers by the end of the year. But it can be anything from barometric pressure readings to temperature to every sensor on your wheel and part as it moves. Cameras, it's interior readings. It's really mind-blowing for me even to think about the number of data points. All of them not as popular, right, as geolocation, which is kind of the low-hanging fruit that companies think about when they think about vehicles. But you can start to get some interesting use cases of, like my team was thinking about tracking when wheels would suddenly dip down and real-time mapping out potholes for Department of Transportation or situations like that.
Another question concerning the APIs. Are these like only accessing the data, or are they also analyzing the data and combining the data that you get?
Yeah, so the APIs will be accessible by the end of the year in the SDK emulator, and there are, certain partners are able to access those now that we work with and combine them with their own.
Okay. I talk to you later on because at SAP we have a similar tool, so I would like to connect with you.
Okay, yeah.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any. I was wondering, GM had the Corvettes for the game now. What's going to be the next big thing that you're planning? What's the next big event that we have to look out for?
Well, there is a tool that we're working on finalizing that we hope to have done in the first quarter that I think will be game-changing for the automotive industry, but I can't
be more specific.
Yeah. But that's the challenge I'm going to put back to my team. My job is I will continually find those safe spaces to allow them to be innovative. So I'll do my part, and they have to keep innovating and do their part too.
Lovely. Okay, as you said, you'll be here later during the day as well.
And I'll be tomorrow.
So there's going to be time to talk this through and to discuss more ideas. Thanks again for having you here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.